Back to the show. We're going to speak to Mike Carlson, NFL analyst and regular voice on the show, in just a couple of minutes, and that's because Tom Brady has finally retired, and for real this time, so he says. It was a slightly less dramatic announcement this morning on his social media channels.
Good morning, guys. I'll get to the point right away. I'm retiring for good. I know the process was a pretty big deal last time, so when I woke up this morning, I figured I'd just press record and let you guys know first. So I won't be long-winded. You only get one super emotional retirement essay, and I used mine up last year. So really thank you guys so much, to every single one of you, for supporting me, my family, my friends, my teammates, my competitors. I could go on forever. There's too many. Thank you guys for allowing me to live my absolute dream. I wouldn't change a thing. Love you all.
Delighted to say Mike Carlson is on the line. Mike, still getting emotional at the end there. It's kind of weird doing this piece in that we've already had these chats about like 12 months ago. And it's sort of, I suppose the natural question, like for something like Tom Brady, is like, where he ranks in the pantheon. But I suppose like 7 Super Bowls as a quarterback, and again, the fact that we've had all these conversations already and playing till he's 45, everything about him. I suppose there is a more legitimate question in where he ranks in, I suppose, the general American pantheon, even outside of just football or even outside of just sports. How big a deal is Tom Brady?
That's an interesting question, because I'm not sure if outside of football, and I think last year we probably had this discussion. I had this discussion on OTB at some point, and Brady is, to me, quite evidently now the greatest quarterback of all time. But he and the Patriots and Bill Belichick have never been the apple of the American public's eye. There are people, football analysts or statisticians, who are obsessed with proving that Brady was the luckiest of all time, as opposed to the greatest of all time. And anyone who understands luck or probabilities or whatever knows that 7 Super Bowls in that career is not a question of luck. But there's also the scandals, quote unquote, of the Belichick Patriot years, and Brady and Deflategate, quote unquote, which I always called Ballgazzi at the time, because I thought it was so flimsy. But they still hang in that, and I think there's a sense of I wouldn't call it envy particularly, but everything seems to have come too easy to Brady. He's almost too perfect in that sense, which I think is why people jumped all over the chance to kind of bring him down to size. If we had a tabloid press in America the way we have in London, they would have done that, 10 years ago, with great glee. But, so I think it's a kind of mixed legacy there, but certainly, we'll see what happens when he moves on to his next era as a commentator, probably, because he's got the contract in his pocket already. Exactly how much he's loved by the American people. And I think you also have to go back. Football players don't have that universal kind of idolization that, say, basketball players had in the 80s and 90s, and baseball players had for decades up until the 60s. And I'm not sure why. I mean, there's a long book to be written about the way American football became America's number one sport in the 60s. But, maybe Joe Montana, but even Joe Montana was never a Michael Jordan type character. He was never a Babe Ruth type character, or even a Willie Mays type character, if kind of true of Tom Brady in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might get to his future as a commentator in just a couple of minutes, Mike. But it's funny, you're mentioning there that maybe it was always a little bit too perfect, and he had the Patriots were always the villain in some ways. I wonder, is him having the big retirement, coming back, and then it not going great this year, and then kind of almost a simple announcement today, is that something that'll almost make him more endearing in his legacy? Is that people will have seen him, even though they still made the playoffs, and like, I mean, it's not as if it was a complete and utter disaster this year, but it wasn't a year worth tagging on to his unbelievable career.
I mean, one of the things I said was I was amazed that he didn't retire after winning the Super Bowl in Tampa.
Yeah.
To me, that would have been the perfect end of a career. But I said at the time, I understand he's highly competitive. He wants to play. But think about what that extra year cost him. I don't know. And half of the football pundits out there are more gossip columnists than football pundits, talking about everything except the sport, which they don't really understand. But I don't know what the state of his marriage was before he ended that retirement. But certainly you can attribute that as the major factor in the divorce. You could argue that ending the retirement last year's retirement probably cost Byron Leftwich the head coaching job in Jacksonville. It certainly cost Bruce Arians the head coaching job in Tampa. You can make all kinds of what if scenarios had Brady retired at the time. And I think had he kept to his original retirement, again, it would have been sort of on a high note. Yeah, they didn't get back to the Super Bowl, but they had a good season. And you can't expect to be there every year. This year's season was not very satisfying in any way. And you can make a lot of excuses, but there was no Brady magic in this season. It would have been, he was beyond that. Maybe Tom Brady at 27 might have pulled more out of that team, but not Tom Brady at 45. Not that he wasn't, throwing the ball effectively. So I think that this announcement is exactly the same as the past season. It's a damp squid. Squid, yeah. A damp squid, sorry. Yeah, a damp squid. I like that. And how it affects, I'm not sure, does he gather sympathy for that, or do people just say, there's a guy who hung around a little bit too long,
yeah.
like so many other. And there's an old saying, which I think Belichick believes in. I think I may even heard him quoted it, but it was Branch Rickey, who was a baseball general manager, who said it's better to get rid of a guy a year too early than get rid of a guy a year too late. Yeah,
Belichick's certainly done that a few times over the years.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure. But it's funny, like, even listening to him there, like, why did he stay on? What was there to win? And by the way he's getting emotional at the end, is like, I think he just doesn't know what to do outside of playing. But that's playing amateur psychologist, Mike, and you don't want to do that. But at the same time, with Brady, you've seen him so long. He's obsessed with the game, and you do, like, we'll talk about Fox and what he's going to do next. But I just get the impression more than almost any athlete that I can remember that he's just going to miss. He doesn't know what to do without it.
I think that's a really good point. And I always thought it was kind of strange last year when he was talking about the divorce, and he kept saying, I love the game, I love my teammates, but he never kind of said, I love my life. I love, and I think he did say, I love my children or something, but it just seemed to me that his focus has been so monomaniacal is probably too strong a word, but so intense on the game itself and on winning, and on doing what it takes to prove that you're a winner. And his career was driven, I mean, not just at the pro level, but also at the college level, by not getting recognition, by having to fight for everything that he got, starting job, whatever. And I think that motivation probably was still there. And I doubt that anything else brings him enough satisfaction, if his company, the TB12 is successful, if he becomes a successful announcer, that's not the same thing as being proven the greatest winner, basically, in the history of the sport.
Yeah. The announcer thing is interesting, right? So he signed a 10-year deal, like, for huge money, like nearly $40 million a year with Fox last year. It was obviously put off until his retirement, but it still stands. And, you know, he could be calling the Super Bowl next week, I think, because it's obviously it's Fox's turn around. They've got Greg Olsen in there instead of him now, who's actually doing a good job. But, you know, this was probably what they wanted, was Tom Brady on in his first year doing the Super Bowl. So if he goes back to that, if that stands, like, I suppose there's two questions. One is, like, is the announcer Tom Brady something you're looking forward to? And then I suppose secondly, I was talking to Arthur outside about this earlier, and it's like, does it lower him in some way to be doing, you know, random Carolina versus Green Bay games in the middle of December, when it's like, Tiger Woods wouldn't do it, Michael Jordan wouldn't do it, even Peyton Manning is doing it in a weird way where he's basically hosting a chat show with his brother during the game, as opposed to just like being the voice of football like Tony Romo. It feels like it should be below someone of Brady's stature.
Yeah, it should be someone like me in there. You know, it's a job.
Well,
it's a job anyone can do, you know, if you can talk well enough. And in a strange way, my suspicion is that you're going to get a fairly anodyne kind of analysis, color commentary from him. But I probably would have said the same about Peyton. And, you know, I think if I were Fox, which I'm not, although I did offer once to work for them and change my name to Mike Cosell, because all the other guys were sons of announcers, so why couldn't they pretend I was as well? I would put him on the pregame show with Gronk. You know, because they brought Gronk into I don't know if you've seen it, because I watched the games on Game Pass, so I did see it, and they literally have 7 guys standing in a semicircle, basically all have about 7 seconds each to say something. So it's like whoever says it the loudest does it, but they all say the same thing. I think a word, what was the word? Yips. Last week, the key word, everybody had to say that the kicker had the yips. But Gronk is really funny. And I know I get the sense that his looseness and all plays off against Brady's straight-laced kind of all-American boy. And I wouldn't be surprised if rather than stick him in the booth with Greg Olsen and run the risk that it doesn't mesh and the combo doesn't mesh, if they stuck him there for the Super Bowl and probably got some pretty good value out of him, then they've got time to do tests and all the other stuff they do to figure out where he fits in. He could take Sean Payton's place, since Payton's now the coach of the Broncos, and in the NFL, everybody wants everyone to start working yesterday, so that they don't lose something to some other team whose coach is actually only doing the normal 9 to 5. The one thing I know, I think, is that Brady's probably not going to want to go out and play golf 7 days a week. You know, and not like Michael Jordan, who at least that was a career for him, because the bets were so high that he could, when he was good, he could make a lot of money at it. You know, but you know, he's producing. He's got a company that was producing some stuff. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got the Tom Brady TV12 company. So, you know, there's more or less stuff that he could do. I'm waiting for him to like guest star on the Manning Brothers podcast. That would be a lot of fun as well. And to me, that's the thing. I'd love to see Tom Brady having fun with what he's doing. You remember when he was like being carried off drunkenly off the Super Bowl party boat in Tampa? And you just got the sense, well, yeah,
that was amazing.
He's just like us, you know.
It's probably because he hasn't had to
go out and have a big time, you know, and enjoy himself. And I'd love to see that, because he really is all business when it comes to football. You know, like I said, it's an obsession. Winning is an obsession, and like Bill Belichick, you know, all you see is the obsessive part. It would be nice to see a kind of public, happy, relaxed Tom Brady, you know, and you know, maybe Giselle would get jealous and come back. I don't know, you know.
Poor Giselle, caught in the middle.
Poor Giselle, yeah. And here I am sitting alone on a Wednesday night talking on OTB.
Mike, you mentioned the Super Bowl there. It's Eagles Chiefs, a week and a half away. We'll talk about it beforehand. Just on the conference, we've only got a couple of minutes here, but just on the conference championship games, like, we had the sort of Mahomes on one leg sort of answering the challenge of the pretender Joe Burrow, and that was incredibly good game and incredibly interesting. But given we're so tight on time, the Eagles 49ers game where the 49ers lost their quarterback, who's already their third string quarterback, a guy comes in, Josh Johnson, who's been on like 150 teams in 15 years. He gets concussed. Then they have to bring back in Purdy, who's not able to throw the ball.
Right.
Have you ever seen as farcical a situation in such a high-profile game, in such an important game? Because that was a game the 49ers could have won. Their defense was dominating.
Oh yeah, and the officiating didn't do it any flat, didn't give it any flattery as well. I thought it was a really badly officialed weekend, which is becoming a more and more common complaint. I saw a game when I was a kid where the Baltimore Colts were in the conference championship. I believe it was called the division then because there were only two. And Johnny Unitas was hurt, and the backup was hurt, and a guy called Tom Brady, who was a halfback, who played quarterback at Ohio State, he quarterbacked the whole game. He'd thrown about 50 passes under Woody Hayes at Ohio State in his 3 years as a quarterback, and he only threw about 7 in this game. But that was the closest I could see. But they prepared for that. They hadn't prepared for losing Purdy and having to play Johnson. They certainly weren't prepared not to have either of them. And this is why the Brady announcement surprised me a bit, because we were looking at, will Brady go to the Raiders where Josh McDaniels is? Do he and Sean Payton, who Miami got fined and had a draft pick taken away because they were tampering with the two of them to come to Miami together? Will they wait a year and then get together? I think Rex Ryan said he thought that Brady and Payton would take over in Washington once the NFL got rid of Dan Snyder. And then this game happened. And my first thought on Monday was, well, if Purdy's not going to be ready until training camp, till the exhibition games probably, then maybe Brady could go to San Francisco and, he could be for a year even, and while Purdy and or Trey Lance became the quarterback. But that all is out the window now. I think the interesting thing is that we didn't really see how healthy Jalen Hurts is either, whether that his passing was a bit erratic in that game. So whether the shoulder is still actually bothering him, he and Mahomes each have 2 weeks to, get more healthy. So I really think, you kind of have to just put the injury situation aside and look at the game as, let's assume that both of them are basically 100% or close to it in this game. And it makes the game even more fascinating.
Yeah, loads to talk about before the Super Bowl. First time it's been 2 black quarterbacks, both of their injury situations, etc. We'll get...
that takes me back to when Doug Williams was quarterbacking Tampa, and a reporter literally asked him, how long have you been a black quarterback? This is what I mean about NFL pundits.
Yeah, the best of the best, the cream of the crop. Mike, thanks so much for helping us.
Always a pleasure.
Talk about Tom Brady tonight. We'll talk to you before the Super Bowl, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks, mate.